You're listening to an Ono Media podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Into the Dark podcast. I'm your host, Payton Marlin. I'm so glad you are here watching or listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below. Just any interaction with the video honestly helps so much. And if you are listening on audio and can leave a review or head over to Instagram and leave a comment, thank you for supporting the show. It feels like it has been so long since I recorded an episode, but that was because last week I ended up going to Arizona for a little bit. And while I was there, I went and got my Dutch Bros, and I got a large because I had kind of been staying up all night. I wasn't really sleeping. And so I got a large, and I was at my sister's house and I was sitting on her couch, and I put my Dutch Bros down on the couch, which I know you're like, I do it all the time at home. I don't know. I always tuck my drink in at home. Honestly, it's my fault. It's a different couch. Anyways, my Dutch Bros, my large Dutch Bros tipped over and spilled all over her couch, literally all over an entire cushion. And I had to sit there with a toothbrush and scrub it out. And I had to do 2 rounds, and it still smells like coffee. So I'm so sorry, sister. But that story's not over, because then I got home today. I go get a Dutch Bros, this time a medium. I bring it into the bathroom. I jump in the shower. I'm getting ready to put on my makeup, and I go to grab my Dutch Bros to move it from my bathroom sink over to where I do my makeup. Slips out of my hand, falls down onto my bathroom floor. And in my bathroom, I have a really big white, like fuzzy rug. It's just super comfy. Spilled my Dutch Bros all over the rug. Okay. I was able to clean that one up a little bit easier, but the worst part about all of this is that I've now wasted 2 Dutch Bros, which means I have to get in my car and drive to get another one because majority of the drink spilled. That's honestly the worst part, because my drink. That's so sad. I don't get to drink that. Yeah. So anyways, needless to say, I'm going to make Garrett carry all my drinks from now on, but especially my coffee, because I just think this is a sign that, not that I'm not supposed to be drinking it anymore, but that I'm not supposed to be carrying them anymore. All right, you guys, that was my 10 seconds. Let's get into today's episode. Quick trigger warning, this episode includes discussions of sexual assault, so please listen with care. If you're a woman, you have probably heard lots of safety advice throughout your life. You know, tips like, if you're at a bar, don't leave your drink unattended because someone could tamper with it. Or don't walk alone after dark. Or never tell a strange man where you live. Not even Uber drivers or casual acquaintances. I mean, I could go on, because there is so much advice out there that is supposedly there to keep women safe. The problem is that even if you follow all of these rules and still do everything right, bad things still happen. There are dangerous people everywhere. And if you don't follow the rules and someone goes on to hurt you, people might say you're responsible. Victim blame instead of the actual culprit. While it can be tempting to try and find a reason for what happened to people or to point out the things that they could have done differently, in this episode, I'm going to keep the blame where it belongs, and I want you to try to do the same. Keep it on the criminal and the people who helped him commit the crime, not on the woman that he hurt. And that woman's name was Savannah Spurlock. Now, in 2019, she was just 22 years old. And like a lot of people her age, Savannah loved going out to bars and partying, meeting new people, having a good time. She was single. She lived with her mom in Richmond, Kentucky. But it's also worth noting that Savannah was a mother of 4. Her youngest 2 were twins who had just been born in December of 2018. So they were barely a month old by the time New Year's Day came around. Now, Savannah wasn't with their father anymore, but he was involved with the children and actively raising them. But even with his help, Savannah had a lot on her plate at 22. She hadn't been able to socialize over the holidays between being pregnant, recovering from giving birth, and caring for her newborns. So by early January, she was ready to just get out of the house, have a little break, and see her friends. Everyone needs to have fun and socialize, even new mothers. So on Thursday, January 4th, Savannah decided she was done sitting at home. She called all of her friends one by one and asked them each if they wanted to go out. But almost everyone she talked to said no. It was a weeknight and lots of them did have work in the morning. However, one person, Jocelyn, agreed to go out with her. And then Jocelyn and another guy, Dion, said it was okay for the two of them to come to his house in the nearby town of Lexington. So that ends up being Savannah and Jocelyn's plan: go to Dion's house. Savannah arranges for a babysitter and made her plans, and she's thrilled to be going out because this was her first chance to do so since having the twins. Now, at about 9 in the evening, she borrowed her mother's car keys and walked out the door. The plan was for her and Jocelyn to go to Dion's house, have a few drinks, hang out there, just have a good time. Savannah didn't know exactly when she would be home. It kind of depended on the vibe at Dion's place and how her friends were feeling. But given all of her responsibilities and commitments, her mother, Ellen, assumed Savannah would be home relatively early, except then the hours ticked by with no word from her. It's starting to get late. Ellen's getting concerned. Sometime after midnight, her mother, Ellen, calls Savannah. But Savannah just answered, says she can't talk right now, and hangs up. She didn't sound upset or like she was in trouble. It seemed more like she was really distracted. She must have been having a good time. So Ellen was like, okay, maybe she's just staying out later. I'm not going to worry. Sure enough, sometime later, Savannah did call her back, and this time she was using FaceTime. Now, in this video chat with her mother, Ellen could tell that Savannah was very drunk, which wasn't surprising because she had been out all night. And Ellen also noticed that Savannah was in a car, not driving, and there were at least 2 men in the vehicle with her. And Ellen didn't recognize the men, but Savannah was smiling and happy. She said she was having a good time. And even though it was very late, she was just going to keep hanging out with her friends. Savannah said she probably wouldn't be back for a few more hours. She's just checking in. She'll be home close to dawn. And since Ellen trusted her judgment and thought Savannah seemed okay, she accepted that answer and they hung up. And then all Ellen could do was wait for her daughter to get home. Except the hours continued by and Savannah still didn't come home. Not at dawn, not at 8 a.m., and not ever. She also now wasn't answering her phone when her mother was trying to call. But Ellen was able to reach Savannah's other friends to ask if any of them had seen her that morning or heard from her, or if they knew where she was. But none of them had. So finally, Ellen calls the police to report Savannah missing. One of Savannah's friends also filed a report once she heard that she hadn't made it home the night before. Because here's the thing. Yeah, Savannah liked partying. This wasn't unusual. But she loved her children even more. It wasn't like her to disappear well into the next morning without a word to her mother, to a babysitter, or anyone else. So the police leap into the investigation. And after talking to some of Savannah's friends, they were able to kind of build a timeline of the night she went missing. This is what they learned. Like I mentioned before, she left her mother's home at 9 p.m. with plans to go to Dion's house with Jocelyn. And that's exactly what she did. She and Jocelyn met up with Dion at his place in Lexington, Kentucky. And then they hung out and drank for a while, but Savannah felt restless. She wanted even more people, more alcohol, more stimulation. This was her one night off. So eventually she convinces these friends to go to a bar with her. And since she had been drinking, she left her car at Dion's house and carpooled to the bar instead. Now, when they arrived, the bar was packed with people, even though it was a Thursday night. And clearly, this is exactly what Savannah had been wanting. Everyone could tell she was happy to be out and about. She was striking up conversations with strangers. She was flirting with guys. Plus, she was drinking, and she kept drinking until she was very drunk. Now, at about 1 or 1:30 in the morning, her friends are ready to call it a night. They had plans the next day. They didn't want to stay out any later, but Savannah wasn't ready to leave. So Dion took off without them, and Jocelyn stayed behind to try and convince Savannah that it was time to go. Except Savannah wasn't listening. She began noisily arguing with Jocelyn, kind of creating a scene. And things got so heated that a bouncer actually intervened between Jocelyn and Savannah. Now, at that point, Savannah told Jocelyn, "There's no way I'm going to leave. But if Jocelyn wants to go, she can." Savannah was like, "I'll be fine. I'll find another ride." And since she's an adult, her friend is like, "Okay, fine. You said I can, and I'm going to leave." So she leaves the bar without her. Now, luckily, the place was still crowded, and there were plenty of witnesses around. So the police were still able to figure out what happened next. Savannah keeps partying and drinking, and she stays until the bar closes at 2:30 in the morning. And after last call, she left with 3 men that she had just met that night. Now, the investigators didn't know their names, but their faces did appear on the bar's security cameras. There was also a camera pointed at the lot where the men were parked. So the officers see Savannah get into one guy's car along with his friend, and they also had footage of the other man leaving in his car too, but the whole group's together. So Savannah is in a car with 2 of the men, and then the other guy is driving in his own car alone. Now, from there, the police were quickly able to identify all of the drivers and ask them who they had been with that night. And that's how they learned that she had actually left with 3 men: Brandon Lewis, Isaiah Chase, and David Sparks. Now, all 3 of them were very cooperative when they learned that Savannah, who had left with them from the bar, was missing. Or at least they came across as cooperative. All 3 of them consented to interrogations and shared more about what had happened that night. They said Savannah was very drunk, she didn't have her car, and apparently she didn't want to call a taxi or an Uber. And on top of that, she clearly wasn't ready to go home and go back to sleep. Based on the way she was acting, the men thought she wanted to hook up with someone, or at the very least keep drinking and partying. So once the bar closed, the 3 friends invited her back to David's house, which was about an hour away. The idea was that all 4 of them could meet at David's and keep the night going. Now, Savannah was thrilled with the invite and agreed to go with them. Now, during this drive to David's place, this is when Savannah FaceTimed her mom, like I had mentioned before. That's how the mom knew she was with 2 men. And then David, Savannah, Brandon, and Isaiah arrived at David's house. Now, David had plenty of alcohol on hand, so the 4 of them kept drinking until they were all very wasted. But it soon became clear that the alcohol was hitting Savannah pretty hard because, according to the men, she passes out. And according to the statements they gave police, Isaiah and Brandon both decide the party is over at that point. So they carry her into a bedroom at David's house and lay her down on the bed so she can sleep. And then Brandon and Isaiah go home. They said they figured David would keep Savannah safe while she slept off the bender. And then when they woke up, Savannah would head home. And according to them, neither of them knew what happened after they left Savannah passed out at David's house. Except then the police asked if they could pull Brandon and Isaiah's cell phone records. Like, "Hey, we got your story. Can we do this?" And once they saw the men's photos and videos on their phones, it became clear that a lot more had happened that night. Both guys had a bunch of photos of Savannah with her clothes off. Now, in some of the pictures, she was awake, she was posing for the camera. But then as they go on, it's clear that in some of the pictures, she's unconscious. Some of the videos and photos showed the men touching her inappropriately while she was passed out. Now, the cops are like, and they asked Brian and Isaiah, what is this? This is illegal. And this is when the two of them changed their story. They still said that Savannah had come to David's house willingly, and once they arrived, she drank until she was blackout drunk. And the whole time, she was flirting with all three of the men, kind of acting like she was interested in them. They say she even took her clothes off at one point and let them take pictures of her. And then she passed out before she even had the chance to put her shirt back on. Now, Brandon and Isaiah say at this point they helped Savannah get into David's bed. But now they admitted that David's behavior took a disturbing turn once Savannah was passed out in his bed. While Savannah was unconscious, according to the other two men, David took his pants and underwear off and acted like he was going to sexually assault Savannah. Obviously, she's not sober enough to consent if he's thinking he's going to have sex. She wasn't awake. So he's committing a sexual assault. And Brandon and Isaiah didn't tell the police originally how they had responded to this. They don't tell police if they tried to stop him or if they were just like, David's his own person, he can do this. They did say that right away David stopped what he was doing. Like he was like going into it, and I was like, I'm just joking. And then he complained that he was frustrated because he thought he would have a chance with Savannah, and if she was still awake, they would possibly be hooking up by now. He made a show of trying to wake her up. And then the two men say when that didn't work, he groped her again while she was unconscious and not able to say no. But apparently, Brandon and Isaiah don't have any problems with this because obviously they took pictures of David touching Savannah's body. Like this is just a fun, good time, drunken night. Now, Brandon and Isaiah both said they left right after this, after taking the pictures, just like they had said in their initial statements. They told police they hadn't taken David's behavior very seriously. They thought he was a good guy who would never actually hurt Savannah. And it's hard to understand how they could mean this. I mean, they had already seen him groping her and they were like taking pictures of it. Apparently, they don't think that this is dangerous or have any problem with it. So needless to say, Isaiah and Brandon are like, when we left, she was there passed out with David. But police have an obvious problem with these statements. But they also now have a lot of questions for David too. Now, he said that once Brandon and Isaiah went home, he went straight to sleep on the couch and left Savannah alone in his bed and didn't disturb her again. He says later that morning, she woke him to ask for his address. Now, David tells police he assumed Savannah was calling someone to pick her up and she needed to know where she was. So he says he gave her the information while on the couch and then goes back to sleep. He's hungover, he's exhausted. And when he finally wakes up for real, he claims Savannah is gone. David said he figured someone had picked her up and she had left. And he says if she has gone missing, it happened after she left my house because she was definitely fine that night and morning. Now, the police weren't sure if they should take David's statement seriously. After all, there were no witnesses around. Isaiah and Brandon do claim they left. So does David. Nobody could corroborate his claims that Savannah slept through the night and then left in the morning. And on top of that, the officers who handled the interrogation were just getting a bad vibe from all three, but especially David. But there's nothing concrete to act on. The whole time the police were questioning him, they just feel creeped out. They had a knee-jerk reaction that they shouldn't believe everything he was saying. The problem was there wasn't any physical evidence to indicate that David was lying to them. And when the detectives searched his phone, they didn't see anything strange. There weren't more videos of him alone with Savannah. So the day after Savannah's disappearance, though, David had texted his sister to ask where she had bought a particular rug. That is a little sus, right? But it's not hard evidence, and the police just have to keep looking for more clues. The problem was there weren't any more witnesses to talk to. There was no more physical evidence they could find to analyze. And at this point, the investigation was stalling out. They had kind of put her timeline together, but now had hit a roadblock. Savannah's case was starting to become cold. And in the meantime, her friends and family still hoped that she was alive, that she was going to come home soon to her babies. They didn't want to give up on her if there was even a chance that she was still okay. So her loved ones set up a Facebook page called Missing Savannah. And on it, they shared photos and missing persons posters, encouraging people to contact a tip line if anyone spots her. They also posted updates from the police. They did everything they could to raise awareness. And thanks to their effort, the page actually racked up more than 42,000 followers. And while they didn't generate many usable tips, it was encouraging to know that so many people were supporting Savannah. And on top of that, the police organized massive searches all throughout Kentucky. They covered more than 200 miles, and these included fields and wetlands, the sort of places where bodies would turn up. But they also contacted childhood friends, old connections from church, everyone who had ever known Savannah. The police were open to the possibility that she might have just been overwhelmed and run away as a new mom. Maybe someone had helped her disappear, except all of these investigations go nowhere. And frankly, Savannah's family doubted that she would ever leave her life intentionally. She would never abandon her children. So as the days passed, everyone's hopes began to dwindle. They keep fighting for Savannah, but it felt like the efforts were going nowhere. And before anyone knew it, 6 months had gone by. It was now the summer of 2019, and still no one knew what had happened to Savannah that night. And then on Wednesday, July 10th, 2019, at about 5 p.m., the police finally get a new tip. But it wasn't the one they had been hoping for. See, a farmer who owned property outside of Lexington had been working near a strawberry patch, and he kind of noticed a bad smell. So he called the police, who then searched the area. Now, this tip is a little odd because law enforcement officers had actually already searched this exact strawberry patch in the search for Savannah. They had covered the ground with a fine-tooth comb not long after Savannah disappeared, but apparently they had missed something pretty major. Because now, searching the second time, police find a body buried in the field about 1.5 feet deep. The remains were badly decomposed. They couldn't identify the deceased until the coroner performed an autopsy. And that's when they confirmed it was Savannah. Now, unfortunately, her body was too badly deteriorated for the mortician to determine her cause of death, but it was very obvious that she hadn't died on accident or of natural causes. For one thing, her remains were attempted to be buried or hidden. And on top of that, when she was found, she was actually totally naked. Someone had used shipping tape to bind her feet together, and there were a bunch of trash bags in her grave with her, as well as a rug. I know. All of this points to murder, and that is a scary detail. Now, this is a sad discovery, but it wasn't unexpected. Half a year had passed since Savannah's disappearance. Her loved ones had nearly lost hope that she would ever come home alive. And luckily, now that the police had found Savannah, they also had another key clue, because get this. The strawberry patch where Savannah was buried was actually on a family farm. It was a farm owned by David Sparks's family. And the man who had smelled the odor in the strawberry patch was David's father, the last guy to have seen her alive. In fact, David must have known that his dad called the police before they had uncovered Savannah's body, because when search teams showed up to the farm, he was actually there and was visibly nervous. And as the investigators walked across the property, David made sure he was following them, keeping an eye on them. It's very obvious that he is aware of what's happening. And now I'm going to confirm to you, if all of this wasn't strange enough, the rug Savannah was buried with looks exactly like one in David's home. And if you remember, he texted his sister, said, "Where did you get this rug?" Investigators now know that Savannah had bled on it, so David had disposed of it along with her remains and then texted his sister so he could buy an identical one and nobody would ever notice that it went missing. So now the police knew that Savannah had not safely escaped from David's property back in January. This is hard evidence considering the rug she was buried with is from his house. And now they're doubting the story more than ever. Not to mention the way he was acting when they had showed up, also just the entire investigation. Less than 24 hours after Savannah's body was found, David actually drove to the police station. Keep in mind, cops had not asked him to come in. Detectives were just building a stronger case. They had no intention of arresting or interrogating him at this point. They are gathering evidence. But David parked his car out front, left the keys inside the vehicle, and approached an employee at the station and said he needs to speak to a lawyer. David is turning himself in. Except here's where it gets weird. He freely admitted that the police had good reason to suspect him in Savannah's murder, but after turning himself in, he also insisted he was innocent. Before Savannah's body was discovered, David had actually told some friends that he felt like he was being set up to take the fall for a crime he hadn't committed. He acknowledged that his behavior on the night of the disappearance was creepy and weird. And David also knew it didn't look good that he had been the last one to see Savannah alive. However, he is adamant to police that he did not hurt her. Instead, he tells police, "You are overly suspicious due to the circumstantial evidence." And they were singling him out instead of trying to find the real killer. He was being set up. He also complained that his friends, including Brandon and Isaiah, were wrongly treating him like he was guilty. Apparently, Brandon and Isaiah had been texting him nonstop since Savannah had gone missing, and they had been telling him, "Hey, if you had anything to do with this after we left, you need to come clean." Which is kind of ironic because the two of them hadn't really cared about justice for Savannah on the night of her disappearance, seeming as they took pictures of their friend groping her while she was passed out. Either way, David now said it was unfair that everyone assumed he was a killer when he hadn't done anything. That's basically the same thing he said when he turned himself in, too. David told the officers that he knew he was about to be charged with Savannah's murder because of how everything had played out. He says he was going to fight for himself, but he also wanted to be cooperative in the meanwhile. Sure enough, when he was charged with Savannah's murder, David pleads not guilty. And then, because he didn't qualify for bail, he remained in jail while he waited for his trial. But one day, a guard was searching David's cell when he found something interesting. See, during his free time awaiting trial in jail, David had been sketching, and in particular, he had drawn 2 pictures of naked women. And in one, the woman was tied up, and in another, the lady was free. Now, one of the subjects in his drawings looked a lot like Savannah, while court officials couldn't identify the other woman. Still, it was enough to make some people wonder. Why is David drawing these 2 naked women? If he had killed Savannah and now he was sketching her, did that mean there was another woman that was also a victim? It wasn't a lot to go off of, but many people believed David could have killed more than one person based on what had been found in his cell. Except, of course, David denied all of these allegations. He still claimed he was not guilty. But by the time his court date rolled around, his legal strategy had changed. It was now December of 2020, and David was facing charges of murder, abuse of a corpse, and evidence tampering. And in addition to all of the other evidence against him, police had actually found traces of Savannah's blood inside his home, which is pretty concrete, meaning something bad had happened to her in the home, unlike what he said. So he actually changes his plea to guilty, and he admits that he had killed Savannah and buried her body under the strawberry patch. Now, in his confession, he also said he'd acted alone. His 2 friends really had left. Nobody else had helped him with the murder or the cover-up. The problem is that to this day, David hasn't spoken in detail about how or why he did what he did to Savannah, meaning we still don't know Savannah's cause of death. It's also impossible to say if her murder was premeditated or if it was something that happened in the spur of the moment, an opportunity. That said, after his arrest, officers did find a note David had written, and it was in his things, and it's unclear if he ever meant to send it to anybody. In it, he said he now knew what he was capable of and that he could, quote, squeeze the last breath out of another human. So make of that what you will. As far as the courts were concerned, all that mattered was that David was willing to acknowledge what he had done, not the question of how he had done it. So they accept his plea, and David was sentenced to 50 years in prison, the maximum penalty for his charges. And that's where this case ends. But before I wrap up this episode, there is one topic I want to touch on. Again, as this case came out, a lot of people felt tempted to judge Savannah for the decisions she made on the last night of her life. They were saying she shouldn't have been out so late alone. She shouldn't have gotten so drunk. She shouldn't have left the bar with strangers. She shouldn't have left her babies at home as a new mom. The problem with these criticisms is that they put the blame on the wrong person. Even if you disapprove of partying, drinking, casual hookups, you would probably agree that nobody deserves to be murdered for going out and having a good time. Women should be able to go out alone, get as drunk as they do, go home with whoever, and not be murdered. That is just the reality. Now, like I said before, do a lot of women take precaution because of the statistics and the reality we live in? Yes, but that doesn't deny the fact that no behavior should result in murder. And I don't want to forget what Brandon and Isaiah had condoned before leaving, agreeing to the mood that was set. Honestly, could be a sequence of events that led to what happened. To this day, Brandon and Isaiah have never been charged with anything related to her murder, but what they did the night before is wrong and illegal. The good news is her real killer got caught. After all, the majority of the blame lays with David, the man who took her life. Now, unfortunately, even though he's behind bars, there are a lot of other predators like him who are free today. It's why women take precautions. As long as these guys' friends choose to protect them, agree with sketchy behavior, stand by them, the world is still a dangerous place. And it's sad that people, especially women, can't go out drinking, meet with people without needing to wonder if they're going to survive the night. But unfortunately, that is the world we live in today. And there aren't any signs that it'll change anytime soon. So as this case is wrapping up, please take a moment to think about Savannah as the amazing mother she was. Think of her family who loved her so much, who sat and did what they could to support her while she was missing, the pain and grief they have felt since she was taken too soon. That is the core of this story. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time as we go further into the dark together. Goodbye.